You or someone you love needs help for an addiction. Where do you turn? Foundations Recovery Network offers individualized treatment for the whole person. Our goal goes beyond short-term sobriety. We address substance abuse and co-occurring mental health issues together, providing a firm foundation for long-term recovery. The first step is often the hardest, but we're here with a free assessment, insurance information, and treatment options. Our confidential helpline is available 24/7, so call 877-714-1318 and discover the Foundations Recovery Network difference today.
Yo, what up? Thanks for tuning in today. Thanks to Humans for bringing us in, and thank you for your continued support of the show. This is Seth Manter, and you are listening to the Tuesday episode of Sober Guy Radio. So on today's episode, I am talking with Kim Huerta. Kim Huerta has multiple years of working in the mental health, social, and working in social work, working in public service. Kim began her work in public service in 1988 as an eligibility worker for the County of Sacramento. In this role, Kim worked to determine benefits available through public assistance such as access to education, food stamps, and Medi-Cal for families, primarily single parents and their children. In 2004, Kim completed her MSW and went to work for Solano County Department of Welfare Child Protective Services. Kim worked there for 9 years, an emergency response social worker, where she investigated allegations of child abuse, provided services to families in need, determined whether children should be removed or remain in homes of families that were struggling with a plethora of psychosocial, economical, emotional, substance abuse, and mental health issues. But before we get to Kim, be sure to check us out at www.thatsoberguy.com. There's a bunch of resources there. You could check out all of our past episodes, and you could get information on upcoming live shows and events. Also, if you wish, you could hit me up on Instagram at SoberGuySeth, or if you feel inclined, and please do not hesitate, you could email me at seth@thatsoberguy.com. Also, super stoked to announce that on Friday, September 7th at 7 p.m., we will be hosting our very first live podcast event at the Phoenix Theater in Petaluma, California. Super honored to be joined by special guest TJ Woodward. TJ is the author of best-selling book Conscious Being. He is also the author and creator of Conscious Recovery. We're going to talk a little bit of shit, going to talk some sobriety, some recovery, some mindfulness. We're going to have a couple laughs. Who knows? We may shed a tear or two, but the plan is to keep it lighthearted, have a good time. So you could check that out. You could log on to www.thephoenixtheater.com or thatsoberguy.com for tickets. Tickets will sell out for this event. Super small venue. I think there's only 150, 200 seats. Tickets are like $10 or something like that. Super cheap. So come out and join us for the evening of fellowship, some recovery, some good times. So Mom, yes, that is right. Kim Huerta, the social worker, is my mother. It's an honor to have you on today. How you feeling? What's going down?
Hey, Seth. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really honored and blessed that you include me in your sobriety.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, just like I had Mel on the show a couple weeks ago, I think it's super important to involve the family, especially, in this path of sobriety. It's definitely important, because I think that you guys, you as my mother, Mel as my wife. We will have Jay on the show too as my stepdad, my father. You know, you guys struggled with this shit while I was going through my struggles. And I think it's just as important for you guys to get your story and your word out there as it is for me. You know, we get a ton of emails from wives and mothers, children, you know, asking for a little bit of help and guidance, you know, and the only way that we could do that at That Sober Guy is to share the stories of others. So, you know, it's most definitely an honor to have you on. It's going to be a good time. We're just going to kind of sit back and kind of have a normal conversation, have some fun, you know, and just kind of shoot the shit about, you know, what you went through and your, you know, kind of how maybe you were first, you know, how you first experienced the alcoholic, how you experienced them in your professional life. And then, you know, obviously we're going to get into, you know, your personal life a little bit too, because you didn't only have one son that was an alcoholic or an addict. You got to deal with two of us shitheads. So I think there's definitely going to be some value added there. Yeah. So this is going to be a good time. Just kick back, relax. So I think what I'd really like to do, Mom, is get into your childhood, maybe not your early childhood, but your later childhood. You grew up in a family that was, as I see it, full of fucking chaos. You had, sorry for the cursing. So that's one thing that I'm really working on. I'm trying to scale that back. So we're going to do a little tally. F-bomb number 1. Hopefully we stay right there. So getting back to, you know, the content, you grew up in a family that was, as I understand it, full of chaos. You grew up with 6 other siblings. You were the oldest, and I think the one closest to you was 5 years younger, 6 years younger.
1 year.
Oh, 1 year. Okay. So that goes to show how much I know about your childhood and what you had to deal with. But one thing that I think is super important is you grew up in a household where there was a lot of drinking going on. So if you could kind of take us back to maybe your early adolescence and tell us about that and tell us how that kind of led to you leaving that house at a fairly young age.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it was chaotic when I grew up. Being the oldest of 7 kids within 10-year time frame, the youngest is exactly 10 years younger than myself, and they were twins. And my mother being just not equipped to be a parent. And she was an immigrant. And there was, I cannot recollect a time in my childhood where there was not drinking in our household. So that being said, drinking was normal. It was a normal way of being in the world. So even as a middle schooler, coming home from school, my mom being wine drunk on the couch and chaos going on. And so I had to pick up and fill in a lot of the parental role that my mother was just ill-equipped to handle. And so, of course, I drank as a teenager. You know, we'd go out with my friends and we partied a lot. We drank a lot of Colt 45. And what's that red stuff? Some red stuff. Yeah. So we would, you know, we drank as kids. We drove and drank. And there was a lot of shenanigans that went on around drinking. My mother, bless her heart, you know, may she rest in peace. She struggled a lot. She struggled with mental health. In my opinion, and my father was very aloof. And so as a child, I was left to my own resources most of the time. So I grew up where I just did what I wanted to do. There was no parameters as to what you do. There were no rules. I wasn't really taught anything. I left home when I was 17. I was still in high school. I got an apartment with a friend and, of course, drank. And I was so lucky when I it was before I was 18. I got a job at the Grand Canyon. And in Arizona, they had just changed the drinking laws to be 18. So on my 18th birthday, I drank legally. And that was a party, the Grand Canyon. We partied a lot. And I met your father, Steve Manter, who was from the East Coast. And we partied our way across the country and ended up in Massachusetts. And we drank. And so that was just normal. Our normal way of living was that we drank. Probably the only time I didn't drink throughout that time, just so your listeners know, I no longer drink. I no longer drink because of choice, because I got sick. And so it's better for me to not drink, which is fine.
Yeah. So no, you bring up a very good point. Like, I just want to be, 100% clear with the listeners out there. Like, you don't identify as an alcoholic or a drug addict. But I think what is important is that the copious amounts of alcohol that you probably started out drinking as a young adolescent, as you had referred to, and then into the years at the Grand Canyon, and even when you guys moved back east, I mean, that was just kind of a normal thing. Everyone around you was doing that. So it wasn't a problem with you. And to be, 100% transparent, my true beliefs are that drugs and alcohol were not my problem. My problem was most definitely a problem with Seth. And the reason that I used drugs and alcohol, especially in my later years of my addiction, was to get the fuck out of my head. So that's number 2. We're going to try and keep it less than 5. We are 12 minutes in. So I'm going to take a deep breath. And we're back. I really do mean it. I am really trying to stop the F-bombs, but I do kind of pull a little bit of humor into that. So yeah, so you guys, you and Steve, my dad, it was definitely like social situations that you were using the alcohol to go out and have a good time. And hearing stories of your adolescence, like, I think that you were already a pretty outgoing person. So it's not like it or maybe it did. Did it make you feel, more outgoing, or was it just kind of something you just did because everyone else around you was doing it?
Right. And that's why I wanted to preface all that with the like you say, the copious amount of drinking that you did. And it was a lot of drinking going on. However, no, I do not identify as an addict. I never felt like I needed to have more than 2 glasses of wine or a beer or 2. I could always put it down. And I never had the urge to have a drink. However, what drinking did do for me is it did facilitate me to have more fun and to get a personality. That's the part that I felt like I didn't have. I wanted to be that fun person or the funny person or the person that people wanted to be around. And alcohol did do that for me. It provided me with that outlet to be able to let loose and to relax and to, let go of control of whatever I needed to let go of. So that being said, alcohol did serve a purpose for me. And, fast forward to now and I look back and I always thought I was more of an extrovert and the person but in reality, I'm really more, probably like you, Seth, I probably am more of an introvert. And alcohol did provide me with that outlet to kind of come out of myself in a way that at that time felt more comfortable for me.
Well, so that's definitely groundbreaking to me because I've never looked at you or thought of you as an introvert. And I think that it's, I'm happy that you have that ability to share that with myself. And, I don't know if you know this or not, but this is going to release to the world. So the world will have access to this. And I'm sure that you're going to get multiple comments back that's saying, no way, you are not an introvert, but you felt that you were an introvert. That was definitely a feeling that you had. So let's kind of circle back to your story. So you guys had you and Dad had moved to the East Coast, Massachusetts, and kind of just lived in your early 20s, late teens.
Correct. So moved to Massachusetts when we were 18, and lived in Massachusetts, and we moved to Wyoming when we were 20. The ripe old age of 20, and Aaron was born when I was 21, and you were born when I was 24. So in hindsight, I was just a child.
Yeah.
I was just a child. And those were the days that I did not drink. When I was pregnant and when you were small children, I did not drink. I did not drink again probably until I became single. And then, I needed to meet people. I needed to get out there. And so then, when work was over, and then I would drink. So. Yeah.
So let's talk about the divorce, though. After talking, I had the opportunity to talk to Siri DeMuth yesterday. And she actually is going to release, she released on the episode before this episode. And so Siri DeMuth is the author of The Way We Stay, super, super dope raw book. And we had this conversation about, when she went through separation with her son, Nate's dad, and we got a little deep on that because, I awoke to the idea that, I wasn't the only one that during the divorce and as she was single that kind of searched for a male role model. And just to back up a little bit, she had referred to, that Nate was always attached to the construction worker guy neighbor, or, one of her friends that was just super cool. He was always drawn to the older man. And, I kind of had some flashbacks at that moment that we were talking about that. And I was like, man, that was most definitely me as a young child. So you and Dad separated, got divorced. You packed us up in your VW Bug.
It was a Pinto station wagon. Green.
That's even cooler. That's even. I thought the VW Bug was a cool store, but so it was like a puke green.
Puke green.
Hell yeah, the puke green Pinto station wagon. What was it, like a 1970?
Probably like a 1974 model around there.
Hell
Were they
yeah.
even there then? Yeah.
That's awesome. So you packed me and Aaron up, packed up pretty much all of our belongings into the station wagon, and you headed out west from Wyoming to California. And like I don't really have any recollection of my time in Wyoming. I don't have any recollection of the trip from Wyoming to California. I think my, very first memory is we were living in Roseville, and I was probably 6 or 7 at the time.
So you were 3, and you were 3 when we moved here, and so which made Aaron 6. And we moved in with this guy that I had gone to high school with, who was also an addict. Although he wasn't just an alcoholic, but he was, he grew a shit ton of weed in his backyard back in the day. And he used a lot of drugs. And I was oblivious to that whole lifestyle. I mean, I'd lived in Wyoming for 7 years. We had lived in Wyoming for 7 years. lived what I felt was a pretty wholesome. So that was a, big error on my part at the time. And in hindsight, I know how traumatic that was for you and for your brother.
And see, that's so crazy because, like, I don't even remember that. I don't even remember that whole situation. I think I remember the dude's name. It wasn't Bobby, was it?
Bobby Adams. Sorry.
So just say it was.
Yes, it was Bobby.
Okay, so I remember a little bit more than I think. So we lived with Bobby for a little bit, and what happened next? Like, because I don't really remember. Or so what ended that relationship? What caused us to move out of that house or apartment or whatever the fuck it was? So that was number 3.
Yeah, you're the one counting, not me.
I know. So I got two more. Okay. So yeah. So what was that?
So I believe we were there for around a year, and the lifestyle was just not a lifestyle that I could live. I had 2 children. I was a mom. I was trying to work. I was trying to figure out the world. So we moved out, and we actually were unstable for a period there. I can't recall. I think we got a roommate for a short period of time, and then we finally settled into our own apartment. And I was, again, trying to work and be a single mom. And it was challenging. It was tough. And I think the hardest part for me was that, and this is really easy for me to say now in hindsight, that I did not understand child development. I was uneducated at the time, and I just knew that I needed to go out and make enough money so I could buy cookies. And
so I don't think
things.
Yeah, and there's definitely no fault there, right? Like, you were a young single mom. You had two young boys. I know Aaron was kind of a little wild one at the time. And we'll get into that, but you were just doing the best that you could do to keep us, I don't want to say to keep us alive or whatever, but
keep us out of the ghetto was the main goal.
Yeah. Just living life. Like, there's definitely no fault there for sure. So during this time, as we get into our own apartment or house, is this when we moved into Roseville and we met Danny and Carol and all of those, or was that?
Right. Our first apartment was in Citrus Heights, and our good friends Danny and Carol from Boston, and it was an interesting time in our life because they glommed on to us, and we were kind of like family. It was the family that at the time I felt like I never had, because they were there for us emotionally, and they helped pick up the pieces with you guys. If I needed somebody to be there for you, if I had to work late, they were there. The problem is that they too were addicts, and there was a lot of partying going on with them, and they just partied. They just partied. Animals.
Yeah. I know one thing that I do, looking back at those years now, one thing that I do remember for sure was that it was like, I don't even think that we had known him for that long. And then all of a sudden it was like we had this strong connection with Danny and Carol. They had 2 daughters. So there was definitely that feeling that Kristen and Carrie Ann were sisters of mine. And it was kind of like Danny and his sister wives. Almost, we were,
yes, it was.
we were together all the time. You guys were, again, super young, like still in your, early to mid to late 20s. I don't know how old you guys were, but you guys were young, and you guys were still most definitely, partying and having a good time, but innocently. Obviously there were a couple of consequences that came from Danny's partying and using and stuff, but looking back at that, like, I had always romanticized about Danny. He was always the fun guy, the partier. This man had so much love for me and Aaron and my mom. He was most definitely a role model. And I remember super into hockey. We were playing hockey at the time, and Danny was most definitely there, and he was present. And there's one thing that I will never forget, the video that I think we borrowed his video camera or whatever, and my dad had sent you some money or whatever, to buy us some. No, I take that back. You were doing a video that we were going to send to Dad because our hockey skates were in disrepair. Like, they were pieces of shit. But most definitely a testament to, you as a person, as a single mom raising us. You most definitely tried to keep us in sports and in, with positive reinforcements. You tried to keep us busy. You did the best that you can. But so we were making this video, and you were lacing my skates up. I don't remember who was recording, and you said something to the effect of, "No, we're going to send this to your daddy." And I think I responded like, "No, I want you to send it to Danny."
Yeah. Yeah. He definitely was a dynamic individual who definitely did love. He was full of love. And I'm grateful for those years that we had with Danny, as chaotic as things got at some of the time. But it was a kind of like the best of times and worst of times in our lives.
Yeah, for sure. And then so going back to, what I was mentioning about the conversation that I had with Siri and her son, Nate, I mean, would you agree 100% that I was searching for that father figure, and that I found it kind of in Danny, or not kind of, but I most definitely found that in Danny.
Oh,
for
absolutely.
For sure. So during our childhood, I think it's important. One of the questions that I wanted to ask you, through the divorce with Dad, through the trip across, pretty much the western U.S. from Wyoming to California, through living with Bobby, moving to Roseville, meeting Danny and Carol and Kristen and Carrie Ann, was there ever a time that you had thought that either myself or my brother, like, there was maybe something emotionally broken with the two of us? Or was it more of you just thought that we were kind of growing into our own?
No, there definitely was a time, and I can totally pinpoint the time. I don't know if you recall the Christmas that your dad came to California to take you to Wyoming for Christmas, and he didn't bring you back. And somehow, I don't recall the whole story 100% because I don't even really know the whole story, but you and your brother ended up in Maine with him, and then maybe back to Wyoming. But anyway, I had no way of getting you back from him. And it was the hardest year of my life. I mean, correspondence. I mean, we didn't have cell phones back in the day.
Right.
So there was no correspondence. I didn't really know where you were. I had no way of getting a hold of you. And so when you did finally come back, it was because he couldn't do it anymore for whatever reasons there were. And you came back and you were both so different. I mean, I think a year had passed. You were in first grade, maybe. And you went from this skinny little, scrawny little guy to, you probably gained like 50 pounds. I mean, it was shocking how much weight you had gained. And I don't know what Aaron had been through, but there was a definite shift. And I'm not blaming that whole thing because, I don't know what went down or how that went down. But when you came back, it was, you two were a handful. Aaron more so than you were. I think that Aaron was the one that got a lot of attention. He had a lot of behavior problems from the get-go. So, and you kind of got shuffled under a lot because of that. But in my memory, that was the demarcation of when there was a major behavior and emotional shift in both of you.
It's so, I could only imagine what, was kind of going through your mind as we came back, because obviously we were disconnected for a year. Like you had talked about, we had pretty much come back as completely different children than what we were when we left. And it's, I'm holding the tears back right now because it pains my heart because I could only imagine what that was like. I know that, during that time, again, like it's so crazy that I don't have like super, like I don't have really good memory of my childhood. I do remember going to Maine. We were living, my dad had a girlfriend in Maine and she had an older daughter that was into like, rock and roll. Like she listened to Poison and Metallica and Skid Row. And it was definitely during, the big hair classic. Well, it's classic now, but at the time, like it was the business. And I remember like Aaron totally gravitated to that kind of alternative lifestyle for sure. He kind of turned into and I don't know if he was like this as a younger kid, but I do remember him turning into the more kind of alternative, against the world, like fuck you. I'm okay. So that's number 4. I'm gonna be this guy. This is the cool guy. So I just want to fast forward a little bit, getting into the years of when you met Jay, who Jay is the man that raised me. And I do want to be 100% honest as well. Like, even to this day, Jay is the man who raised me. Jay is my father. Steve, who I still have a strong connection, I wouldn't say super strong, but I still have a connection with. I respect the fact that he is the dad. He whether he played it or not through the majority of my life, he's most definitely the dad role. I do talk to him on a regular basis. I have a relationship with him. But Jay ultimately was the man that but Jay is the man that raised me. So take us back to what that whole thing looked like. Like we went on a camping trip. That's when I met Jay for the very first time. And one thing that I remember is that I didn't know, I didn't know this guy from Adam. He was cool. Like I didn't even put two and two together that, you had a thing for him or he had a thing for you. I remember one thing I remember about this camping trip. It's super, super fucking awkward. So that's number 5. So I'm okay. So that's gonna be the limit.
Is it the compact hunk story?
It's no. So, well, maybe it was the compact hunk when you were talking about. I thought you had called him Sweetie, or maybe you called him my little compact hunk, and I had said, well, you tell the story because I don't really remember it.
Yeah. So yeah, honestly, Jay and I, we had just started dating and we went on this camping trip and just getting back to you and Steve, I always still wanted you to have a relationship with Steve. It was good for you to know who, your father was. And so I really pushed the issue for you to be able to go with him. Now, was that a prudent decision? I don't know. But I think that in my heart that I couldn't have lived with myself if I'd have kept you separate. So had just been with Steve. You had just we went on this camping trip. It was a Friday, and you had just come home from Maine. You and Aaron had just come home from Maine on Thursday night, and I had agreed to go camping with Jay and his friend, and Jay was bringing his nephew Michael, and his friend was bringing his son. So, and then another friend was going with kids. So it was going to be a family-friendly thing. I don't know what the heck I was thinking. I didn't even own a sleeping bag, for crying out loud. But I was like, oh yeah, we'll go camping. And I remember Aaron being, oh, I'm not going. Hell no, I'm not going. And I forced him to go. And he did have a good time in the end. But anyway, so that night when we got there camping, so of course we're partying. We're partying. And we had a snipe hunt. Remember snipe?
Oh, yeah.
Snipe.
Yep,
So
yep.
we were doing a
Snipe. Well, us kids were definitely totally into it. You guys are probably standing back there with, I think it was the Miller. I think you guys were drinking the Miller at the time for some reason.
Yeah.
NGD or something like that.
NGD.
Yeah, the NGD. And you guys were probably just standing back like, God, look at these kids, like.
Oh, no, we were in it too. We were pretty hammered.
Yeah.
So we're, hanging out and playing with you guys. And I was like, wait, where's my compact hunk? And I will never forget this. And you looked at me, you ran up to me like, here I am, Mom. And like, I'm out of my mind, right? And I'm like, no, I meant Jay. And oh my God, you were so devastated. You were so devastated. Now I look back and I'm like, that really hurt him because we were really close.
Yeah.
You were my baby. So that was kind of that demarcation, even though you were 9, that, it was like, I'm no longer her baby.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I think that, something that you had kind of referred to, is that Aaron, and again, like I don't really remember the childhood, but Aaron, because of Aaron was the way that Aaron was. Aaron got a lot of the attention, but I think the attention that I got from you was more. So Aaron got more of the disciplinary attention from you, and I feel that I got more of the, the heartfelt and the love. Not to say that you didn't love Aaron, but I do feel that you and I were most definitely. We had that stronger emotional and love connection for sure. And I think that, that is probably one of my very first memories of like, oh, well, shit. So now that Jay is the compact hunt, this dude that I have no idea who he is, he's definitely cool. He definitely knows how to have a good time. Like I think he took us and the kids fishing. He taught us how to set up. Like that's how I learned how to set up a tent that very first time. So he was definitely like, damn, this dude's hella cool. But at the same moment, there was probably a little bit of hate there. I shouldn't say hate, but there was some resentments there. Like, oh, hold up. You know what I mean? Like my mom is, And I think that that's, so super, and no, obviously no fault of yours.
No, but I think that's a really significant point, though. That story sticks in my mind because I do know. I mean, I think probably even immediately when that came out, I'm like, oh my God, I broke his heart. And so those things do stick. And I understand and I get how that affected, how our life then, how progressed from there for you.
Yeah.
So, I think that you felt invisible at that point.
Yeah, for sure. So. And then I think too on the other side of things, maybe after the camping trip, as your guys' relation began to grow, we did a lot. You guys did the, semi long distance relationship. You lived in Sacramento. Jay lived here in Vacaville. But you guys were together pretty much every night. Either we would drive down here and stay. He would come pick us up. We would ride in the back of the truck. We would come to Vacaville and stay. And I think it was like at that juncture that I was like, you know what? This guy is cool. Like, this is the man that, I could see this guy as being my dad. Because he was always super, like, he was into me. I remember a couple things, like Jay taught me how to throw a football. Jay came to school with me one day. We were making scarecrows, and Jay was like the guy that was there. And I think it's super important that at this time, Jay was 27 years old. He was a baby. He was a baby for sure. And I look at my life when I was 27 years old and compared to where Jay was at when he was 27 years, like, I was in no way, shape, or form ready to be a dad or a stepdad. But I think Jay really gravitated towards that. Like, it's definitely something that he wanted to be, and it obviously speaks volumes to his character. For sure. Absolutely. So you guys ended up staying together. We moved to Vacaville. We moved in together, and Aaron was not having any part of this. He was definitely showing signs of getting in trouble in 7th grade, like hanging out with the wrong crowd. Was most definitely using, I'm sure. And I remember he was just kind of the punk kid. And I can't really speak to what Aaron was going through at the time. So that's kind of what I wanted to speak to. Like, what did you notice about Aaron's behavior change? I mean, I don't think it was that much of a drastic change because he had kind of always been this jerk. It's just the magnitude of stuff that he was doing was most definitely elevated. Yeah. Aaron was a challenge. Aaron was a challenge from day one. Aaron was a challenge in the womb. And I was aware that he was using as early as 7th grade. He was in the 6th grade when we all moved together to Vacaville, and come to find out, the first time he smoked pot was when you guys had gone to Maine, when you were gone for that year. So he was probably, I don't know, 8 or 9 years old, and I learned that later on. So yeah, Aaron was a problem. He had a lot of problems, and I still don't really quite understand how that all manifested. But we worked really, really hard at fixing it, at fixing the problem, at helping him to be able to, move through the world in a better way. And as a result of that, you kind of got lost in that because there was a lot of attention put on Aaron. Aaron ran away the first time when we were, he's like in 8th grade, he ran away. And Aaron was cutting, and Aaron was getting tattoos and Satan worshiping. It was really, really
horrendous time for all of us. And so a lot of attention went into dealing with Aaron. And he ran away probably, I think he was a freshman when he actually really never went to high school.
Yeah.
Ran away to Berkeley, and he's sitting up there on Telegraph, nickel-diming people. And, we'd find him and tell him, you're not homeless, you have a good home, So he just did not like following rules. And we spent an enormous amount of energy trying to get him to follow rules that he did not have the capacity to follow. So
yeah, so
his story is a very long drama.
I love my brother to death, and I know that you and Jay and my dad, we all love Aaron to death. Aaron is a special person to us. I believe in my mind that, he still continues to struggle, and, I'll get into that into a little bit. But one thing that I think is super important too is I remember as a young child, like maybe sixth grade, fifth grade even, having to deal with Aaron living that alternative lifestyle. He was gone, and then Aaron would be in jail. And it was all about, all right, yeah, so Aaron's in jail. We're going to bring him dinner. We're going to go hang out with him. We're going to go do this, that, and the other. And not what I'm not trying to say like you guys weren't involved in my life, because you most definitely were. But I remember being, kind of exposed to, and not knowing, maybe indirectly, but being exposed to that type of lifestyle that, if you did continue down this path of using and drinking and drugging, that there were most definitely some consequences to pay. Like Aaron spent some time in juvie. He spent some time in the psych ward for a little bit. I remember that. Spent some time in jail for sure. Like, and you would think that I would learn from his mistakes. But I didn't, and continued down the path that I continued down. So when I just want to fast forward. So Aaron was basically in and out of the home, mostly out of the home from the time that I was in fifth grade up until, he never really came back, for an extended period of time after that. So I had kind of lived the only child. I was most definitely an only child for sure. I think I was given a lot of freedom. I think that as long as I was at home by a certain time, that you guys didn't really question a lot of the stuff. And the other thing too, like you and Jay were newlyweds at the time. Like you guys were kind of living your life. I had a fairly good group of friends here in Vacaville that, you guys were friends of their parents, so you would hang out with them on a regular time. Shane being one of them, we talked about when we first met. And so when you guys hung out with that group of friends, there was definitely some partying and whatnot. And I think that was one of the very first times that both Shane and I have shared this, that we had, started going and stealing beers out of the cooler, and we would take put them in our pockets or hide them or whatever. And we'd go back into Chad and Jared's room and drink them. And I don't know if you guys knew or what, but I think I was given, that was the start of the freedom that I was given. Like, as long as I was around, it didn't, looking back now, it didn't really matter what I was doing. When was it that you realized, so we knew Aaron had a problem. Obviously, you had some dealings with some mental health people, maybe or maybe not, some addiction specialists, some youth officers, some police officers. When did you, or did you realize that, Damn, Seth is, I mean, I was different my whole childhood, but Seth is, I think, maybe drinking more than he should be. Or did you even realize that? Like, you know, one thing that I think is super funny too is like stealing the booze out of the liquor cabinet, you know what I mean? And filling it back up with water or iced tea or whatever. You know, I tried to be mindful of that and do it while Aaron was around for the weekend so that I could blame it on him. But, you know, there was probably some times that you guys were like, this isn't right. Did you know that I was doing that, or did you believe my lies that Aaron was doing it?
Yeah, no, you know, I mean, and I hate to say this, but you know, as our lives progressed, you were the good kid and Aaron was the troubled kid. So, and my style of parenting was the same kind of style, well, but with a lot more love, was quite laissez-faire, to be honest with you. There were not that many parameters. And I was so busy dealing with this over here with Aaron and his behaviors. So the behaviors were what, that's how I parented, was based on behaviors. So no, I didn't really have a clue. I didn't realize that you were stealing beers and drinking them when you were in 5th grade. I guess I should have figured it out when you barfed pickles all over the floor that day. Like, why would pickles make you barf? I don't know. But I did not figure that out. So I guess probably when we really knew, you know, I mean, I think it was probably high school. And in my way of thinking, we knew you were going to drink because drinking was the norm. So we all did it. And so we just wanted you to drink at home. If you were going to drink, we wanted your friends there at the house, and we didn't want you out, you know, drinking and driving. We didn't want you to have to face consequences of drinking and driving. So that was kind of our rule. And probably when we realized that it was a problem was probably after the cruise we went on. And I don't know, what were you, maybe 16?
So that was 10th. Yeah, that was 10th grade.
Yeah, 15, 16. And you drank a lot. And it was at that point that I was, to be honest with you, Seth, I was probably more worried about your mental health at that point because I knew you were depressed. I knew that you suffered from depression. I knew that you had some social functioning problems. Like, it was really difficult for you to go out and function socially. So I was more worried about that. I didn't want to upset you. So, and plus you were way bigger than me and you had the deep voice. And if I addressed the problem, it was just kind of like, you know, I was probably afraid of how I didn't want to damage you anymore, you know, so I took a laissez-faire approach to it because, you know, we drank and I'm fine. So that was probably more or less my thinking. So, and I was mostly concerned. And again, and I knew Aaron was, I don't know if it was drinking so much, but it was the drugs that really bothered me because he was using some really gnarly drugs. And so that was the problem, was those gnarly drugs, you know? I mean, sniffing propane, really? So these were the things that I was finding out. And so when we would address it with Aaron, he would just run away.
Yeah.
So
you were totally normalizing my drinking. Like, you were like, I really don't care as long as it's just, you know, beer. Because I got this other son over here that's, you know, shooting heroin, smoking crack, huffing propane. So it's okay for my 15, 16, 17-year-old son to, you know, drink a couple beers if he wants to while I'm at home. What you didn't know, you know, and drugs, alcohol, like, I truly believe it doesn't matter the drug or the alcohol. It doesn't matter, you know, like, I know that there's a ton of people out there that will argue this point with me. If if heroin was available when I was growing up, like if it was readily available in Vacaville, I probably would have ended up a heroin addict. Or if meth was as big in Vacaville, you know, or even in Northern California that it is, you know, now or that it was 10 years ago, I probably would have been a meth addict. It's just that at that time, alcohol, you know, I was definitely smoking a shit ton of pot. At that time, it's just what became readily available. So my belief and the argument that I could probably get back is that it doesn't matter the drug of choice. It's why we use, I think, that is the biggest problem. Just to be 100% honest, right? That I think there's a lot of, like social shame that is placed on the heroin addict because it's looked at as like dirty and, oh my God, he sticks needles in his arm and this, that, and the other. And it's, you know, it's in my mind, like it's all the same stuff. So that's, and I think that you probably felt a little bit of that because I wasn't shooting heroin, like it was all good. So definitely drank all throughout high school. You know, I don't know if you know this or not, but the night of graduation, or it was the night before graduation, fell through the friend's glass table.
Oh yeah.
And
I think those were the times when we really realized, oh my goodness, we have a problem here. You know, not we have a problem, but there is a problem here. And just getting back to your point, yes, I did normalize alcohol consumption because we did it. It wasn't like it's not a problem, right? Even though my mother was an alcoholic, but it's still, you know, I never knew any children that were alcoholics that I was aware of. That, and then also the other thing is just not being naive, not knowing, being young and dumb, I guess. It was really not until I started, you know, I didn't go to college until you were 16. So when I started my college education was when you were 16. And, that opened up a whole world to me. So, and yes, I absolutely agree with you. It doesn't matter what the drug is. It matters what's underneath and the use. It's the reason for the use. So I agree with you wholeheartedly. I'm glad you bring that up.
Yeah. And then so like also, you know, just kind of getting back to I don't know why I feel like we have to talk about the whole life story, but I do want to, you know, touch on some topics that I think are important, and to get, you know, kind of what was going through your mind as a mother to share with the listeners. So, you know, obviously partied throughout high school, joined the military. I'm sure at that point in time, like there was some shit that had gone down between me and you and Jay, and you guys were, you know, kind of just ready for me to go out and, you know, just kind of do my own thing for a little bit. Cause I will admit, like I had done some pretty horrible stuff. I stole a ton of money from you guys. I was, kind of turned into a complete asshole. Jay had got me a job to pay you guys back. And I remember I failed the drug test because, so what I was doing for that is I was having someone pee in a bag for me. I was taping the bag of pee to my leg. Like, this is just the craziness and the I don't know, I'm at a loss of words right now, but this is just what my addiction did. Like, I had this job. It was a good paying job, and I enjoyed it, and I think I did good at it. And, you know, I was liked on the job site. I was a hard worker. But so what had happened was, the day that, so I had gone like probably 3 or 4 weeks working and taping this pee to my leg and keeping it warm. And I think the day that I had to go pee was the bag had broken or whatever. What it was is that the bag had broken and leaked a little bit out, and I went to go dump it in the cup, and there wasn't enough in it. So I peed in that, thinking like, oh, it's going to be diluted. Like it's totally okay. It's going to be all right. Like I continued to use, I continued to smoke weed, snort coke, eat mushrooms, do all that shit, even though I knew that I was at risk of taking a pee test. So I remember coming home, like it was the typical, like we're going to talk to our son tonight. The lights were kind of dimmed. I had gotten home and you and Jay were sitting at the dinner table. Like I could tell, like, oh shit. Like Jay had gotten the drug results, which I'm sure is like
illegal
super illegal. Jay had gotten the drug results before I had even known. And so basically I ended up getting fired, right? Obviously. And so I went and joined the military, and I'm sure at that time, was there like a sense of relief that maybe I was going to go out and find my own way?
Relief. I don't know if that's a word that a feeling that came to me. I think it was, I think that what my main feeling that I had as a parent was just disappointment. Disappointment in myself. Disappointment in my inability to be able to address the issue appropriately. And I can't believe how much work you did on that whole pee thing. That's just crazy.
Insane. It's insanity.
Insane.
Yeah.
I wouldn't even have the imagination to come up with all of that. But anyway, yeah, disappointment. So, and it took you a lot to get into the military. It wasn't like something that you just went down to the recruiter and signed up and they took you right in. There was a lot of steps you had to go through to get there. And so I was actually, we were really proud of you. We were like, yes, this is what Seth needs. He needs discipline. He needs the ability to be able to, I don't want to say strip down to nothing, because I know that's what the military likes to do, and then they build you up. But it was actually really, from our standpoint, it was good for you. And you seemed to be really proud of yourself, and that made us really happy, that you were proud of what you were doing. And I think that was, for us, that was kind of like, yes, things are going to change around for Seth. He's going to start feeling some pride in himself, and he's going to be able to, move into adulthood smoother.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what we felt.
So like I joined the military, and both of my service stations, like I was stationed far away from home. So the only life that you and Jay could see is the conversations that we had over the phone at the time. Like, and obviously I maybe lied about the things that I was feeling and the things that I was doing. And you guys, obviously you guys came out to New York, and hung out, and it was probably at that time that you were like, it's still the same old Seth.
No, we knew even sooner that you were struggling. We knew even sooner because, I knew you were partying hardy in Ketchikan, and we were really worried about that. You were bored there, and there wasn't much to do, but party. I remember seeing pictures, with all the alcohol, and so we knew there was a problem after boot camp, and when you went to Alaska, but we didn't know how to address it because now you're an adult.
Yeah,
and it's a different way of parenting a child when they're adult, especially when they're in the military. So it was a really difficult subject to broach. And we struggled with it. We really struggled with it because we worried a lot about you.
Yeah.
So, and we knew when you called, if you'd been drinking, we knew it.
Well, and I'm sure there was probably a bunch of the drunk dials too. You know what I mean? Especially coming from Alaska, where after the party had gone out, like I didn't have nothing to do but to hang out in the barracks room, and I still wanted to hang out and maybe even talk to to you guys. But then, so, you know, fast forward, like we're going through that, you know, that I'm struggling. You guys come out to New York, you get to hang out for a little bit. Did you guys get to go on the family cruise when were you out there for the family cruise?
No, we missed out on that.
Oh, you guys did. That's right. You guys did miss out on the family cruise. And then you got a call from me that said, "Hey, I'm going to rehab." Well, I was still in New York.
I did not get a call from you saying you were going into rehab.
So so how did you find out about that? Because obviously
after the fact.
Okay. After and then during that time that I was in rehab, like there was we didn't talk, there was no contact. So take me through that. Like, what was that thought like when you were like, wait, hold up. Like, this fool just went to rehab. Like, yeah. So what was that like?
Well, the whole time that you were in New York, it was really a challenge. You know, the whole New York thing, just everything from almost day one from the time you got there was really difficult. So there were times that we didn't get to talk to you for long spans of time, and we didn't really know what was going on. And so we normalized that. We normalized it.
Yeah.
It's just like parents that have a kid that are deployed. Although I was always grateful that you were never deployed to Afghanistan, you know, but you know, we all know what went down and how, you know, what happened. So yeah, we normalized it. And when you did come home, we're like, oh wow, there's a problem. And when you went back, we realized there was a problem. So I don't think I even knew you went into rehab until you went into rehab when you went to Azure Acres.
Oh, really?
And then it was then shared with me that you had been in rehab in New York.
Oh, wow. So yeah, I think, you know, I've shared this a couple times, you know, and I totally, you know, believe that and trust that because that didn't last very long. I think I lasted maybe 3 or 4 days after I had gotten out of rehab in Virginia and was right back where I was at. So to spare the listeners of the show the war stories from the time that I had gotten out of the military to the time that I came to you, because I think this is super, super important. I think that it's, you know, there's some good value added sharing here. When I came to your house, I think Jay was working, and I broke down and I told you, like, I can't do this anymore. I can't suffer. I can't live this life anymore. I want better, you know, and obviously there was a couple consequences that I shared on the show with me and Mel. You know, obviously I didn't want to live that life anymore. And I knew that I was probably facing some serious consequences if I didn't make some changes at that juncture. So let's talk about that day. Like, what did that look like?
So, yeah, I believe it was a Sunday actually when you came home, and I was home by myself, and I had no idea why you were coming over. You know, it was just a normal day. And when you shared with me that you wanted to change and that you were tired and all that, we had a long conversation. I mean, Seth, I'll have to tell you, I just felt such a sense of relief. It was like, because this was huge. I knew this was huge. You know, because by this time I had a career. I was a social worker. I was working with people that struggled with addiction and other issues. And I was like, yes, this is the breakthrough. I was so proud of you. And it's so funny because, like, I'm not that hard of a person to talk to.
Yeah.
But I feel like that, you know, I honored that I was the one that you came and talked to about it. And I was so happy to be able to, be a part of helping you to help yourself. And that was the bottom line. I don't know how you conjured up that strength or that, what it took for you to get there. But I was really happy because we knew, Jay and I talked about it all the time. You were like, it was just like with your brother. I maybe even said to you, you know what, I already got that phone call at midnight that, we didn't know if he was going to live or die. And I was so scared that was going to happen again. And I don't know if I could have survived through that. So I felt like maybe I just felt like, oh, thank God. Now I don't have to worry about this anymore. So for some reason I knew that was the time. I knew that was the moment. And you know what? I knew you had the inner strength, I mean, it's kind of hereditary.
Yeah.
I think you got that hereditary, that, gene. So,
that's super good. And warming for me to hear, because obviously I was coming from a place of guilt and shame and self-hate. And I was most definitely at my max because, looking back and even, you even talked to this, like you saw signs of this when I was maybe a 5, 6, 7-year-old boy. So my struggle with self, started super early, maybe not as early as some of the listeners out there, but that self-hate pretty much built up for 23 years. And I was coming from, a place of shame and guilt and fear and hate. And one thing that I remember, after I had talked to you, like I didn't feel that anymore. I felt nothing but love and compassion. And then I think I called Mel on the phone. And Mel, like I remember Mel was like very like matter of fact, like she didn't believe that that I was going to go, and we weren't even together for that long, right? So making that call, and then I remember hanging up the phone with her, like kind of feeling a little defeated. So getting a little bit back to that. So I mean, obviously this was something like a breakthrough, like this was something positive, something that I needed. Did you ever feel, like that it was hard? I don't know if you shared this with any of your other friends or with our family, or did you feel that was a hard conversation to have, telling people that I was at rehab, or did you even tell people that I was at rehab out of the fear of that they may, judge you as a person, or that they may judge me as a person?
I don't think I felt that way, Seth, because at that point in my life, I already had recognized addiction as a disease.
Yeah.
And I have friends that had been in rehab before you had gone into rehab. And I remember just a quick story, like in 2006 when I had breast cancer, and a very, very good friend of mine, I had gone away for a weekend with her, and come to find out she was an alcoholic. And we had this conversation, and she was, expressing her shame and her guilt and her all of that. And I explained to her, but it's just like me. I have a disease. You have a disease. I can't judge somebody because of their disease. So that was where I was coming from at that point. I mean, as far as talking to friends about you going into rehab, I probably did not share that because I respected your privacy. I didn't want, because not everybody thinks the way that I think.
Yeah.
And I recognize that. So I think that I was just so proud of you that you had made this decision for yourself, because as we all know, nobody can force somebody with addiction into a program.
Yep.
You have to make that decision for yourself. And I knew that, and I recognized that. And so I think that when you came to me, I was like, wow, this is the opportunity. And I was going to move on it fast.
Yeah.
We're going to get this done. We're going to do it now before you have a chance to change your mind. And I just kind of like clicked into social work mode, and we, worked on what we needed to work on to make that happen. And, I just want to recognize Melanie, bless her heart. Yeah, you guys have only been together for, 5-6 months. And she was a part of it. And I mean, that's just one of the reasons why we love her so much. She was there for you. She saw through that. She saw through the addiction. She saw somebody that we saw, that we knew.
Yeah.
And that was just another reason why we loved her. So we tag teamed on it. It was as a parent, it was probably my most proud moment.
Yeah.
Honestly, except for, you going into the military and graduating from high school and kindergarten.
Well, and so that's all that, maybe aside from the military, but all that other stuff was, stuff that you're supposed to do. So we're going to wrap this thing up in a couple of minutes, Mom, but I just wanted to touch on the topic. Like, you worked in social work and public service. You helped a lot of people. You saw a lot of, emotional substance abuse, people dealing with mental health issues. What do you think was the common thread in your story with me and my story with you? And then also, as you were working as a professional in the field, like, what was the common thing? Because obviously you were dealing with people from multiple walks of life, right? And, I'll be 100% honest. Like, I had a really good childhood. Like, I never, we never struggled, outside of, you as a single mom, but like, I always had what I needed, materialistic wise. I always felt love, obviously maybe sometimes I felt deserted at times, but that was kind of my own shit. So what's the common thread there that you saw with me, and then, someone that maybe had a little harder life than me?
Yeah, so I worked in child welfare for the primary part of my career. So I dealt with people that had been accused of or had abused or neglected their children. So I would say that there probably weren't that many common threads. Primarily the people that I dealt with people from all walks of life and social economic statuses, but the bulk of the people I worked with were in poverty.
Yeah.
So poverty was the number one theme, and then what went along with that was addictions, substance abuse, and mental health. So which one came first? You can never know what came first, the chicken or the egg. But I want to say in my career, most of the people that were dealing with the problems did not take responsibility for their own actions. They wanted to fight the problem rather than work on addressing what the problem was, whether it was right, wrong, or indifferent, and dealing with it in a way that would be most beneficial to their children and to themselves. So it's hard to say. I honestly, every situation was so different, but I definitely was well versed in handling people that had mental health and used substances. I want to say probably most of the people use substances.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's fair enough, right? Like this disease, if you'd like to think of it. So, Mom, before we wrap this up, I just want to say thank you, nothing but the struggle that we deal. However you look at your willingness to come on the show, like alcoholism, drug addiction,
this isn't easy.
Substance
to
abuse.
Sit down and
I truly
talk,
believe,
especially
that
with a mic right in front of your face.
it's a problem with self.
This is something that's
is most definitely
super
just a
fun,
coping
and we love to
mechanism.
do. And I think
because
it's
we
so
don't know how to
important
deal with ourselves,
that we do this not
we
to
use,
and
put our lives out there out of ego.
It doesn't matter
where
you
come from, whether you come from poverty
to tell,
or whether you come
do
from
this to
wealth,
share this
whether
with
you're black, you're white,
alcoholic,
you're
or
purple,
the
you're
addict
green.
Still struggles.
It doesn't matter, male, female. It doesn't matter
with
this
the
shit,
child,
the wife
affects
the mother,
people,
the
from
father,
all walks of life.
Every single
there's
day.
other people
it
that
tears
deal with
families
this stuff
apart
on a daily basis.
It causes shame and fear. And
kind
guilt
of my
and
duty
hate.
as a man in recovery, as a person in recovery, to do that. It's also important to say, that this addiction and these struggles, like, it doesn't matter who you are. You could find yourself in the situation that I was in, for the majority of my life. And I know now that if I don't continue to do that, like, I could be right back. It's moments like this that are going to keep me going, another day. So much love and gratitude to you, Mom, for coming on. If you could say, one thing or give one word of advice to the mother out there of the addicted person, or the mother out there of the person that is, new to recovery, what would that be?
Well, first of all, Seth, thank you for doing this, and thank you for having me. I do think it's really, really important for people, for listeners to know that they're not alone, and that this situation is epidemic, and we're all kind of subject to what addiction, the wrath of addiction. And thank you for having me, and thank you to the listeners for listening. So getting back to your point, as a mother, I think I would say you just have to keep loving your child, and hold your child accountable for their behaviors and for what's going on with them, and have boundaries. Boundaries are really, really important. And I think that's with addiction, that's what happens is we don't have boundaries. We lose our boundaries. So that's the best thing that you can do to help your child or your loved one, for that matter, that are struggling with addiction. And patience and love.
Yeah, and I, also just to piggyback onto that, like, I can't really give advice to the mother or the addicted one. Like, I'm just a regular dude. Like, I struggle with this shit. I'm not, a recovery specialist or any of that. I'm not anything. But if I were to say one thing to the mother out there, the father, the wife, the son, the daughter, and most importantly, the alcoholic or the addict that continues to struggle, like, it's not your fault. This is not what life had planned for us. It just happened this way. And the only power or the only thing that you may or may not be at fault of is deciding to make that decision that enough is enough. And I personally, like, that wasn't Seth that made that decision. There was something else that told me, or that spoke to me, that said, like, dude, you can't do this anymore. So with all of that, that wrap on that, like, I think it's super important that we all know that we didn't intend to end up like this. For the mother, like, if you have the son or the daughter that is caught up in the addiction, it has nothing to do with you. It's not your fault. It's just the way that this shit played out. And then also, I do want to say one more thing that's super important. Just for the record, I think there was a total of 4 F-bombs dropped tonight.
I think there was 5.
Oh, was there?
There was.
So did I meet the max? And then also, to be 100% transparent, I think, that this episode is going to go just the way that we recorded it. I even said,
the amount of ums. I think I was able to reduce that. So just giving myself a little pat on the back for the 5 F-bombs. Much love, respect, keep your blood clean. Out.